I want to just thank you again for
Or
being here today with us. We're motivated and inspired by your work and can't wait to hear more about it. So, our first question is just to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
myself, I'm from New York originally. I went to University of Michigan. I was always a tech nerd. Loved the startup ecosystem. Loved the idea of starting businesses. Helped start a company in college, a taxi dispatch software company, helping mom and pop cab companies Uberize their business. Then went to another startup, in the software space, and then after that went to an AI company in 2019, and then was there for about 3 years. Sorry, 2021, right after COVID, I remember it. And 3 years into that, it was the best company. You're working with people that were really invested in my growth, people that I loved working with, a product that was working, the business was working. And then October 7th happened, and my heart started drifting in a different direction. And so, in the weeks after October 7th, I found myself hosting a lot of big events in New York. Um, and we'll probably get to that, started my journey post October 7th in a minute. But yeah, I was always very, love tech. My personal background is I've got two brothers. My parents still live where I grew up. I've got two nieces, and now I'm here in LA. So that was a little all over the place.
Awesome. Yeah, so actually, to segue into the next part, what led you to get involved with the creation of the Nova exhibit and a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, so first off, the Nova exhibit was a what's the expression when you try and convey like a Herculean effort amongst many.
Yeah,
It really, the team that I was fortunate enough to work with was I'll never get that lucky to work with such impressive people, because it was people that chose to do it, with work. Like, it's people that kind of have to do that. These are a group of people that went out of their way beyond what their daily obligations were to make this happen. So in the few days after October 7th, that first Friday, I'll never forget, because those days, as you probably remember, and we all had our own crazy experience those few days. You felt a level of helplessness or uselessness that was very debilitating. And on like a purely selfish level, I was like, what can I do to make myself feel better? I'm just doom scrolling. And I love bringing people together. Like when I was doing tech stuff, I was always hosting salespeople dinners. So I was like, let's throw a Shabbat. And I saw someone on LinkedIn say we're gonna donate venue for, anything Israel related. So I hit him up. He's like, oh, there's a WhatsApp group already of all these people that are trying to scramble. And he throws me in the WhatsApp, and you just see you put 5 Jews in a WhatsApp group, you have 10 opinions. Here you had 10 Jews and you had 50 opinions. And I just come in hot. I'll never forget me and my friend Ryan Daniels. I was like, we are deciding on this organization. You're in charge of this, you're in charge of that. And we mobilized, a 300 person event in like 12 hours. And it was a crazy event because if you remember, it was Global Intifada Day.
yeah,
And so, um, you know, Jews all over New York were scared to leave their apartment. And we got in touch with the commissioner of the NYPD, and the deputy commissioner. And I said to her, she calls me at 10 o'clock p.m. on Thursday. She goes, I heard you need some help. What's up? It was like the most serious phone call I've ever gotten. I said, well, you have 300 or 400 Jews going to be in this venue in Tribeca tomorrow night, and they're all scared to come. She said, I'll take care of you. I said, okay. I got a call from the first precinct Friday morning, and they're like, we got a call that you need some help. And I said, oh, Tanya called you. He goes, Tanya, you mean my boss's boss's boss? Like, I didn't realize the magnitude of what we were involved with. And I said, yeah, yeah. And he goes, okay, we're going to take care of you. And I called the police a few times throughout the day. I said, listen, people are really scared to show up. And they're like, Josh, this is going to be the safest place in New York tonight. And we show up, and there was counterterrorism unit on every corner of the block. And it was crazy, like four cops, four cops, four cops, dogs, the whole thing. And people walked in. It was like the safest they felt in a week. And it was a really beautiful night. And Mayor Adams did a surprise appearance. No one knew he was coming. And that sort of started a series of events. The next morning, the feedback that we got was, okay, what are we doing next week? And so then we hosted a bigger event at another venue, and the energy of people a little bit older than us were so inspired by, and I'm sure you've seen this, seeing younger people get involved and activated.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to help. And so they'd throw us money for security and food and a venue. And we just kept doing these events. We had Brett Stevens come speak. We had Richie Torres come speak. We had Dan Loeb come speak. We had a number of elected officials or thought leaders come and speak, and we did a variety of different format of events, and we built this community that candidly probably should have been built before all of October 7th, right? It was a group of people that were not the typical people that were showing up to these types of typical events. There was nothing typical about these events. And we started doing different formats, smaller ones in people's apartments. We'd get calls saying, Elon Levy's coming to town. Can you get 50 people to come listen to him tomorrow night? And we had the ability to do that. And it was all people that were very influential and emerging in their own careers. It was like the person that worked for the governor. It was the person that's leading AI at this company. And so we built this community. And in New York, it was beautiful because you'd go to these dinners and you're sitting around with 15 kids. When I say kids, my peers, I'm 31. And this one's building bots, and this one's sending drones, and this one, like everyone was just doing what they could. And that's where I got to know Joe Teplo. Joe Teplo's, and if you drop his name anywhere in any city in the United States, you'll just hear people raving about this man, like the most pure soul, really successful on professionally and then personally. I mean, he while being an executive at Salesforce, he's a medic for Hatsala, takes calls multiple times a day, and just beyond humble and philanthropic. And so started to get to know Joe, and Joe had shared with me. Actually, we met each other at a dinner, but then a few weeks later, we were at a wedding in Mexico. It's a great story. And we're in the airport, and people call Joe and I the odd couple because he's like super religious, Chabad. I'm not. Uh, if you ask 100 people about Joe, they all speak highly of him. If you ask 100 people about me, you never know what you're going to get. Uh, so, so anyway, we're in the airport and we get in the taxi to go to the hotel, and Joe looks at the taxi driver and said, "Do you believe in God?" And the guy goes, "See, see," and he goes, "Okay, we're gonna pray to God." And this is a time where, like, being in Mexico, the idea of like publicly showing your Judaism in Mexico is kind of scary, right? It's anywhere outside of like Miami and Tel Aviv is scary. And so Joe, just proud Jew, starts rapping to fill in this taxi in Mexico. And then I rap, and we just have an amazing weekend together at this wedding. And he tells me about this effort to bring the Nova exhibit to New York. And the genesis of how this even came up for him was he was in Israel on October 7th. He was there unrelated to what happened. He was there for a wedding, I believe. And because he's a medic for Hatzalah, found himself, doing some runs, was on the ambulance with Ellie Beer, stayed at Ellie's house, and ended up, FaceTiming with a lot of his successful friends or, people that he worked with, and a lot of them were supporting and sending money for relief. And one of them said, "Listen, when things calm down in a few weeks, I want to go, and I want to go with you." So this person went with his father, and Joe escorted them around. And when this person came back to the United States, called Scooter Braun and said, "Scooter, you have to go, and you have to go with this guy, Joe." So Scooter texted Joe, like, what should I do? Help me plan this trip. And Joe goes, "I'll meet you at the airport." Like they had never met. That's just the kind of guy Joe is. And so Joe went back, took Scooter around, and Scooter, within a few minutes of landing, they were on their way to Beirut, and they did all the things that people were doing, right? They visited the South, they visited families, but where they ended up was this Nova Healing Camp. And the Nova Healing Camp was a place that all of these kids would gather and share their story and write poetry and sing by the campfire and do things that kids needed to do to feel a little bit less alone. And it was a very twisted experience for Joe and Scooter because I think here in the United States, for us, everything was a headline, everything was a number, everything was a statistic. But here you're attaching a name to a story and you're talking to, someone, it's Tomer about Tomer's cousin and Shelly about Shelly. Like everyone's like a face, and it just was humanizing on a level that you can't wrap your head around being so far away. And so, taking it one level further, it hit Scooter here. I think that this was as simple as kids at a music festival, kids at a concert, kids that could have been at my concert. And then what was really, it took it to another level was Shelly came up to Scooter and said, Scooter, you don't remember me, but I'm so and so's daughter and my dad's friend. We met at the Justin Bieber concert in Tel Aviv 10 years ago. And so it just hit him that these are just kids at a concert that could have been at any concert all over the world. Doesn't matter where it happened. And so, I think that's where the anger started to build, or the frustration of not just the world not believing or standing with these kids, but the industry itself. Scooter had been involved, if you recall, with the Ariana Grande show many years ago in Manchester, where 22 kids were killed. And so the whole industry just 2 weeks later showed up in Manchester, put on an incredible relief concert, the biggest artists in the world, and no one asked, who was the terrorist and what did they stand for. And so anyway, the next morning the kids invited Scooter and Joe to go see the Nova exhibit or the expo that was set up in Tel Aviv. And the expo was essentially a huge lost and found in the airport hangar in Tel Aviv, with a few elements from the festival itself. You had some burnt cars, you had porta potties, and it became a place where the international delegations could come and pay an homage to, pay respect to what had happened and honor, and as well as families coming to claim belongings as well. So within a few minutes of seeing this, Scooter and Joe knew this had to come to the States. It was the most compelling way to bring what had happened to the States. So fast forward, I'm in the wedding. I'm at the wedding with Joe, and he's telling me this, and I said, "Okay, let me try and help." And I sent an email, and it was to a friend of a friend, and this person came back to us and said, "This is the most compelling way to bear witness without getting on a plane. I'm in for 250K." And from there, I was like, oh, me being the salesperson I am, I'm like, this is easy. Let's keep going. And it became very clear very quickly that we were all getting ourselves into something much bigger than we had thought we signed up for. And so that's where, Scooter and Joe had this incredible idea, and the relationships they had, and the platform that obviously Scooter has, and they had this crazy idea, but they needed some additional support in execution. And by putting my arms around it all, I started getting more involved by the day. I'd say to Joe, I'm like, Joe, like, let me be your assistant. Like, what do we, when's the marketing meeting? And when he's like, marketing meeting, what are you talking about? I was like, well, we need to, we're just a big WhatsApp group with all these create like phone numbers. No one knows who's who. No one has any roles and responsibilities. And it was a very complicated project for a lot of reasons that we can get into in a moment, but it needed someone to sort of spearhead and run it. And I accidentally found myself in that role. And, every morning was up at 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. with the Israeli team, then going to work. And then at 5 p.m., kind of getting on with LA on the PR and marketing side. And it became really long days. And then 2 weeks before the exhibit opened, that's when I decided I had to quit my job to run this full time. So that was the journey from I would say October 8th through deciding that how the exhibit came about, and then deciding that it was something I need to spend my full-time efforts on.
Wow, that's incredible. and super interesting to hear a lot about how it came along. I feel like a lot of people don't really know the full background of how the exhibit came to be, but so many people, I mean, it's been blasted on social media. So many people have been. And yeah, it's so interesting to hear about how it came to be and so incredible that this was able to be put together because not everyone does have the ability to get on a plane and go visit Israel and pay their respects in that sense.
Yeah, look, the story's not about us. The story is about the 400 plus kids that were killed at this festival, the 40 plus that were taken. And so it, it we had a very specific agenda with the exhibit, and we had a very specific message with the exhibit. And it was really smart. Like the way there was something, as you know, there's a lot of effort to try and educate those that don't know or need to know more about what had happened. Our approach was this. I'll give you some like the sauce behind the messaging, and credit to Scooter, as you probably understand, is like a he's really a genius when it comes to this sort of marketing and messaging and PR and understanding what consumers or how to reach people. We knew that music is something that truly is universal. Doesn't matter when you're on a dance floor, it doesn't matter which God you believe in, if you believe in God, what's your view of the Middle East, what's your view when you're on a dance floor, all you care about is the music. And Nova really embodies that in a way that I don't, it's like, you think of Fish or Woodstock or Deadheads, like that's who these kids were, right? They love peace and love. And I probably wouldn't be, welcome there because I'm not that peaceful. But that's who these kids were. And so, when you walk through the exhibit, it doesn't scream Jewish, it doesn't scream Israel. There's no Israeli flags in the exhibit, and it's very intentional when kids or people come through and they write their letters and they write Am Yisrael Chai, we would actually clean those up and take that away because when we wanted people to walk through the exhibit and see themselves, not see Israel. And it was, very effective in bringing in people outside of our echo chamber and outside of our bubble to see that the humanity in this exhibit. So, look, our primary goal with this exhibit was to fight anti-Semitism and educate the world on what had happened. But also the second piece, which we haven't talked about much, is really help raise awareness and funds for the foundation. And the foundation, the Tribe of Nova Foundation, is an effort to take care of these kids as well as the bereaved family members. These kids and these bereaved family members, it's not like a kibbutz where it's like, this is your area, this is your representative, go get relief. This is a community that has no borders. So they're all over the country, in some cases all over the world, and they don't have the support that they need. So that was the two goals of the exhibit. And I think both are it's been pretty effective in both.
Yeah. And with an exhibit like this that is so emotionally triggering, but also so important and bringing awareness, how did you get people to show up?
Beg? No. It's there's a lot of different ways. And it was different city by city, right? When we first got to New York, no one had really heard of this. And so we did obviously a lot of guerrilla marketing. We this is where going back to the beginning of the call, the people we brought in as our partners on this project are some of the best in the business in what they do. Our head of marketing runs experiential marketing for Coachella and Stagecoach and the biggest artists in the world. He does all of their experiential marketing. So, these are people that they're the best at what they do, but they donated their time and know-how and their company's resources to doing this for us, and for all of us. So in New York, we did a combination of obviously social and grassroots, guerrilla marketing, billboards everywhere, different sort of pop-up events, of fundraisers. Where I spent a lot of time was partnerships. So doing very specific outreach to the schools and doing specific outreach to the, to companies, to different organizations. Obviously, different Jewish federations have their own infrastructure that we were able to tap into and leverage. They've spent years, building coalitions with other outside communities. So that was how it started. And then, just like anything else, like as the brand got bigger, it became a little bit, it was always a challenge, but like the strategies and tactics changed over time. I would say one of the biggest points of inflection for the exhibit was the day the protests happened in New York. And it was probably the best thing that happened for the exhibit. And so I'll never forget that day. I was there and I was leaving, had my backpack on, I was ready to go. And I see my security guy, head of security, running, putting the barricades up outside the door. And this is like, we have probably a few days left in our stay in New York. And so we made it all the way here with no one bothering us. And he goes, Josh, they're coming. And I said, oh, this is interesting. Like, what do you mean they? Like 20 people, 50 people? And within like 2 minutes, you see hundreds of people coming down Wall Street. And because of my own experience with the exhibit, I definitely have become, numb to a lot of things. And so when I saw this, I didn't realize the magnitude of what I was seeing. I thought it was almost funny, like that's just where my head was at. I was so deep in the exhibit that like nothing could really mess with me. And not that that's a good thing. That was the way I had to approach my job, right? And so, um, the street is flooded and it's pretty gnarly. Like they all of a sudden the barricades fall and I'm just videoing everything. Like that was my instinct. And it got pretty crazy. The cops show up, hundreds of police, helmets, like the whole thing. So then I finally that ends. I go home and I'm in bed and I start sending the video to the Nova group chat. And Scooter calls me and he goes, "We have to extend." I said, like, what do you mean we have to extend? I didn't know the response to this moment, right? Like, do we put out a statement? And he goes, our response is that we're extending. And I said, hold on, we need to slow down. Like, we don't have the money. We got to line up the vendors because we had to extend all of, security, like, all the different pieces. And so, um, him and Joe put in this group chat that they're in a video of what happened and said, listen, we need about $500,000 to extend. And within a few minutes, we raised what we needed. Like literally 30 minutes later, 10 grand, 10 grand, 10 grand, 15, 2,500. And we announced like an hour later that night that due to popular demand, the Nova exhibit will be staying here. And it just went viral. Like we were on the cover of the New York Post the next morning, the cover, the Nova exhibit,
Wow.
New York Times, Rolling Stone magazine, like all these publications that were hesitant about writing about us previously. Um, Elected officials, everyone from AOC to President Biden to Mike Johnson, like didn't matter where you were on the political spectrum, everyone was condemning the protests that were outside the exhibit. Um, oh gosh, like it was crazy. And then I called the mayor's office and I said, you guys have to come down here. And he's like, well, the mayor's talking about the protest right now at his press conference. I said, it has to be here. So they invited the whole press corps to come down to the exhibit. So you had every local news station come down. Mayor Adams came through, walked around with Sigal and Menashe Mansouri, who lost two of their daughters. And it was insane. And so it became a national story. CNN picked it up. Um, and so what it did though is it validated everything that we tried to explain, which is this exhibit is not political. It's not about a side. It's about humanity. It's about kids at a festival. And if you need to protest this festival, this exhibit, then you're so far gone that you're not even worth trying to engage with.
Yeah.
So it gave us like a sense of validation, or the project a sense of validation that we really needed going into LA. And going to LA, we were able to reach a group of celebrities and elected officials that otherwise we would not have reached without that. Um, and so same thing in LA. Like, how did we market? How do we get people there? Same thing. I mean, it's hand-to-hand combat. A lot of bet, getting influencers to post, getting different organizations to show up. A lot of events. We did an I Believe Israeli Women event. We did an event with Universal Music Group. We did a Netflix night. Like, we would do these events because people respond well to events, and in a weird, twisted way, it kind of became something that people didn't couldn't miss. Like, I don't want to say it became cool, but there was definitely something about the exhibit that piqued a level of cultural curiosity
Yeah.
that other Jewish events didn't do. So,
Right. Yeah. And with an exhibit, sorry, so with an exhibit that is so intense and important, how have you stirred compassion in those who are maybe, I don't want to say far gone because not the pro Hamas protesters that are outside, but those who I guess are not as involved in the Jewish space or not Jewish and don't know about what happened on October 7th in Israel and what is still going on in Israel now? Have you gotten those people to come to the exhibit?
yeah, for sure. We have an amazing uh, an example of a woman who's definitely, leans more the other side,
Yeah.
who's got a big following and wrote a beautiful blog post about her experience at the exhibit. She's a big influencer in the Latino community. Wrote a big blog post about the exhibit and her experience and how, she didn't know. And you can have humanity and you can have empathy for all innocent people that were killed. And it's not about sides. Like, it was a really good example of, you get people there and no one walks through there and leaves and discounts their experience. So, it's hard for me to measure every single person that we had that impact on. But I will say, and I feel really strongly about, um, I feel very strongly about this. I learned this from the exhibit, and Joe taught this to me, honestly. You know, I, my biggest fear in this post-October 7th world is being really hyper focused on anti-Semitism instead of being proud Jews.
Yeah.
The best way to fight anti-Semitism is inviting your friend to Shabbat and showing them how freaking awesome our culture is. And I had this conversation with a lot of the survivors as well. And I'm in a unique position with them that obviously I don't know what they're going through, and I'll never be able to really know. But I have a lot of friends now that were at the festival that have lost a lot of people at the festival, and their life now, and rightfully so, is about telling the story and telling the story and reliving the story. And if you look back at our own history, how we have responded to moments like this was keep our head down and build. And I'm not saying that that's a right thing either, right? There was a lot of mental health challenges that came out of the Holocaust that get resurfaced decades later.
Yeah.
But that group of people went on to build beautiful, successful families, professional careers, and they used that influence to build a major institutions and fight. And so what I would say, it's kind of roundabout to your original question, but I think the response that we need to have moving forward is really about being proud of who we are, fighting, using light instead of darkness. The exhibit, if you remember, ends in the healing room.
Yeah.
And there was a big concert that the Nova guys threw this past year. And for them, it's all about We Will Dance Again. It's of course recognizing what happened, remembering what happened, but it's really about, like, finding the light in darkness. So I would say, like, as you think about your own toolbox and playbook, you got to bring people into the beautiful parts of our culture. And we're not victims. Like, we can't play that. That's not our card.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the most important and honestly only way to look at it moving forward. I mean, to build from everything that's occurred in Israel and just in America and beyond. Like, we as Jews need to move forward and understand what we have had to deal with in the past, but also be able to move forward and grow and enjoy being Jewish and love and be proud of being Jewish.
Of course.
And yeah, so on your end, on a more personal level, what does bearing witness mean to you? And then how did you express that through the exhibit in terms of like your own personal feelings?
Um, still trying to figure out my own personal experience. It feels like I blacked out the last year.
I'm
Um,
sure.
I'll never forget. It was really intense. Uh, and in New York, if you remember the healing room at the end, like that was my office. And so
Oh,
every day I hear the freaking song in the healing room over and over. And then I hear Hirsch's mom because the video was like 20 feet from that desk and it's like over and over. And it really like it messed me up. And I'll never forget one day Milette comes up to me, one of the survivors, and she was pissed at me because I never listened to her testimony. And I said, Mila, I can't. Like, if I listen to yours, I can't listen to anything. This is my job. And if I need to approach this like my job, I need to be able so that you guys can all be taken care of and I can take care of you guys and I can make sure that this exhibit runs. I need to create some distance between my job and living in this exhibit all day, every day.
yeah.
So, in some ways, like, I definitely have walked through the exhibit, but when I walk through it, I walk through it like I walk through my office. Um, I probably did one really deep walkthrough across New York, LA, Miami. But
Okay.
like, I I I never I had my own experience with it because I was too close to it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say too close to it because obviously I wasn't there, but just needing to be able to run it. And then, yeah, I think when it all came out, when I visited the site for the second time, but it was the first time post my experience with the Nova in the summer of last year. And that's when I like it all came out. Because when you're looking at the field, I went December before I was involved with the exhibit, and it's heavy. It's a field though. You don't really understand what happened. And then I'm like, after being there, I was like, wow, I know who, she was hiding in this thing. I know that face that's on the flag. I know, like, too much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, bearing witness, like those are images and emotions that will never leave me.
Right. Yeah. And so my final question is, what does the exhibit look like moving forward? And do you have plans to continue, expand?
Uh,
Just to hear a little more about
the,
that.
the exhibit's in Toronto right now. There's a lot of interest to doing smaller versions of the exhibit in cities like Chicago and DC, and Boston. And there's interest from cities like London, Berlin. Um, it's a weird situation because on one hand, we still have hostages that are in Gaza. We want to continue telling the story so that until everyone comes home. On the other hand, it's a very resource heavy, expensive project. And the reality is, as time passes, people care less.
Yeah.
And so being able to get the what you need to make it happen continues to get harder. And it's also very fluid. Like, I don't think there's any museum that's ever been built that the story is still evolving. There were moments of the exhibit when Hirsch was killed and the six hostages that night were killed. And, when Noah came home, like as the exhibit, how do we respond to that? You have things in there that represent these people. Um, so it's a weird dynamic needing to be so fluid because the story is still going.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, the exhibit was incredible. And I think as much as things are kind of, I don't want to say slowing down, but people are less hyperly focused on everything that happened on October 7th and post October 7th. I
Yeah.
think as much as it is slowing down, I think there is still this importance that remains for people to continue to bear witness. And now that it's so, almost a year, over a year past October 7th, I think it's still important that people are focused on what happened, and we remain working on showcasing that and such. And even like smaller versions of things like the Nova exhibit could be interesting on college campuses and things like that, just to keep people aware and keep people informed on what happened and reach as many people as possible.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I don't want to say but, I'll say and. I will say, the best thing you can do right now in your position on a college campus is welcoming
Yeah,
people into our community and showing them why it's the coolest.
yeah,
Like I really think the yelling, like everyone just keeps yelling louder at each other and no one's hearing each other. And
yeah,
so I really encourage you. I mean, Shabbat is like there's something about the Shabbat. I don't know if it was always this way, but in New York, it's like the coolest thing. You throw like everyone wants to be at the cool Shabbat.
yes, yes, yeah.
So
I'm from Long Island, so I definitely get that.
that's just my last piece for you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was incredible and so informative.